Welcome back to Mystery in Rocky Mountain National Park, Chapter 2, Present Day Ohio. Jake's dad woke him before sunrise. Time to get going. Dad, what time is it? Jake asked, rubbing his eyes. 4 a.m. I want us to get on the road before the traffic starts. This is cruel and unusual punishment. You're right. It's cruel and unusual, his dad replied and flicked on the light, but it's not punishment. Jake squinted and shielded his eyes from the light. Sure feels like it. Grandma has breakfast for you. If you want, you can sleep more while we drive. After changing out of his PJs and into his jeans and a t-shirt, Jake Evans ambled down the creaky stairs of his grandparents' old farmhouse, drawn by the scent of bacon and waffles. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the framed photographs on the wall. There must have been over 100 of them. Jake stopped to study his favorite. It was taken just 2 years ago on Jake's 11th birthday. In the photograph, Grandpa Evans wrapped his arm around Jake, who held the long handle of a shovel in his hands. Beside them was the apple tree they had planted, and behind them were 20 more trees just like it. Jake's eyes were drawn to the smile on his grandpa's face, and he was overcome by an unexpected wave of emotions. Warmth and confidence swirled inside his chest as he remembered that day and what it was like to plant the orchard with his grandpa. And there was sadness, the kind that tries to steal all of the good memories away. About 6 months ago, a few days after Thanksgiving, Jake's grandfather had died. Kidney failure. And complications. Jake didn't like that word, complications. He pushed those memories out of his mind and stared at the photograph, hoping the image of that day in the orchard would replace them. Jake and his mom and dad were spending only one night at his grandma's house before their long drive to Colorado. Mr. Evans, Jake's dad, wanted to check on her before leaving on their vacation. They would be gone for the next 2 months, traveling to 10 different national parks. Jake walked through the hallway and living room and into the kitchen, where his grandma stood at the stove. At 79 years old, his grandmother could still hear footfall in the kitchen over the sound of crackling bacon. "You want your eggs fried or scrambled?" she asked. "Scrambled. Thanks, Grandma." He sat down at the table, and his grandma placed a plate full of steaming waffles in front of him. "You've got a big day ahead of you. Sounds like you three are driving straight through to Colorado." Jake nodded, his mouth full of waffles. She leaned toward him and studied his face. "Either you're just tired or there's something else going on." She went back to the stove and then asked, "Your mom said the school year didn't end so great." "Mom tells you everything, doesn't she?" "Most things. At least the things that matter." Jake's grades were fine. The basketball season was okay. But things were not okay with Gabe and Alex. The three of them had been close friends for years. Then something had happened. Jake couldn't quite understand what, but like a canoe you forget to tie up at night, they had drifted away from each other. The lunchtime conversations had changed. Gabe and Alex were into gaming now, something Jake didn't care much about. Their words were like a foreign language, and he felt like he was looking in from the outside. Every now and then, Gabe and Alex would eat at another table. Then one day, Jake looked up and realized he was eating alone. Then Nick disappeared. At least that's how it seemed to Jake. Last fall, his brother moved an hour away for his first year of college. When Nick came home on the weekends, Jake forgot about feeling so alone. Then Nick got busy with classes and college stuff, and the weekend visits stopped. It was like Nick had evaporated. Then Grandpa died. No friends, no Nick, no Grandpa. He poked at his waffles. Just missing Grandpa, I guess. His grandma sat down at the kitchen table across from him and reached out her hand. "I bet you do, Jake. As strange as it sounds, that's a good thing. It hurts, but it says a whole lot about how much you loved him and how much he loved you." Jake squeezed her hand, nodded, and tried to smile. "Your grandpa left you something." Jake put down his fork and watched her walk across the room to a drawer. She pulled it open, drew something out, then came back to the table and slid a small note across its wooden surface. In his grandpa's handwriting, the envelope read, "Jax." It was the nickname his grandpa had given him. Jake carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a piece of paper. "Dear Jax, always try to inspire curiosity. Seek help early. Learn from friends. Now understand, my boy, every real treasure exploits neglect. The adventure begins, Grandpa. That's strange, Jake whispered to himself. Jake sighed and his shoulders fell. All he wanted was another adventure with his grandpa. Instead, he had left Jake a confusing and sappy list of advice. He read it again. Then it struck him. How could he have missed it? A null cipher. It wasn't the first time his grandpa had written him a note in code. Like this note, most of his birthday cards had been some kind of puzzle. Jake grabbed a pencil that lay on the table, began to underline the first letter of each word of the first line. Always try to inspire curiosity. He assembled the letters A, T, T, I, C. Then the second line. Seek help early. Learn from friends. SHELFF. The third. Now understand, my boy, every real treasure exploits neglect. NUMBERTEN. So what does it say? His grandma asked, placing the eggs and bacon on his plate. It's a code, Jake replied. His grandma smiled. That figures. It's just like your grandpa to do something like that. It says, Attic, Shelf F, number 10. His grandma walked across the room again, pulled a key from the key rack, and handed it to Jake. Finish your breakfast first. Jake scarfed down the rest of his food, grabbed the key, and ran back through the house and up the stairs to the top floor. He nearly collided with his parents, who were carrying their overnight bags down the stairs. Whoa, his dad said as Jake rushed past. The sloth I woke up has changed into a squirrel. Sorry, he called back. I've got to find something before we leave. Make it quick. I want to be on the road in 10 minutes. At the attic door, Jake slid the key into the lock, opened it, and pulled on a dangling string to switch on the light. He raced up the attic stairs into a large open space filled with old trunks and furniture. Clothing on hangers hung from pipes set through the rafters, and nails poked their spiked ends through the ceiling, holding the shingles onto the roof. Across the room, under a tall dormer window, Jake spied a desk surrounded by bookshelves and piled with stacks of papers. On its surface sat a ham radio. A thick wire ran from the back of the radio up into the rafters, where it zigzagged across them, turning the entire ceiling into a giant antenna. Wires snaked through holes in the attic walls and ran outside into the big oak trees that surrounded the house. Jake recalled how his grandpa used to come up here at night and talk with people on the radio from all over the country. It was kind of old-fashioned, but Jake thought it was cool. Shelf F, Jake muttered to himself, scanning the bookshelves. None of them were labeled. He stood back and stared for a while. Then it came to him. Jake counted the shelves from left to right. There were 26. The exact number of letters in the alphabet. Working top to bottom and left to right, he found what he had hoped was shelf F and began looking for book number 10. But there were only 9 books. Jake, his mom's voice called up the stairs. We've got to go. Okay, I'll be right down. He bent down, picked up book number 9, and opened it to the title page. The Journals of Lewis and Clark. There was nothing special about it. Most of the books were history books like this one. Jake sat down on the floor and placed it back on the shelf. That's when something unusual caught his attention. Faint writing on the back panel of the bookcase behind the books on shelf F. He laid down on his belly to examine it. Though he could barely make it out, it was without a doubt the number 10. Jake reached out his hand, pressed on the panel, and it swung open at his touch. He reached further inside and felt the rough leather surface of a book. He drew it out, sat up cross-legged on the floor, and blew the dust off the cover. It was bigger than a normal book and older and thicker than anything on the bookshelves. The leather cover was dyed black, and the front was embossed with a large decorative letter E. He opened it to the first page, which revealed another note, also in his grandfather's handwriting. As Jake went to open the note, his dad's voice called up the attic stairs, Jake, now it's time to go. Jake slipped the paper back into the book and hurried down the stairs, grabbed his bag from the guest room, and made his way back to the kitchen. His parents were already in the truck. Jake said a quick goodbye to his grandma and gave her a hug. "Take care of that." She nodded toward the book. "He's given you his most prized possession." See you next time for Chapter 3.